All right, friends, it's Timon, and we have a new video on JasonBlaha, our good friend, the fitness influencer. So we're gonna do a reaction video to the gym lifting, recruiting, fitness gear slave himself, JasonBlaha. Blaha says the basics of progressive overload and muscle growth. Okay.
Understanding progressive overload. Hey everybody, it's JasonBlaha here, and I thought I would chat with you guys and gals a little bit about this today. If you guys would please click like under my video. If you are not subscribed or following me, please do so, and drop me a comment down under the video. It would be greatly appreciated. So this is kind of a basic video for most newer lifters. This is stuff most advanced lifters know, but it can also be a refresher sometimes. So when we think of progressive overload, people get this idea in their head that number one, it's not necessary for growth, and that's not true. They also get the idea in their head that it simply means just moving more weight through any means necessary, right? So in other words, people are like, well, as long as I get more weight on the bar, then it's progressive overload. And they're missing the point with that. They're missing the point with that.
They're missing the point. In which direction exactly are you progressively overloading, blah, which doesn't make any sense. And I know what you're going to say. Concentrically, right? You're going to overload concentrically. Wow. This is really funny, man.
The reason progressive overload is a critical part of muscle growth is because progressive overload is required to further tap.
Yeah. Progressive overload is required, but going in the opposite direction, eccentrically, for what? For muscle growth. Now, if you keep trying to squeeze your muscles, progressively overloading, squeezing them at the top, concentrically, well, I don't know how long that can take for you to get a micro tear in there. You understand me? But I'm not going to hang around for 50 years to see some newbie gains in 50 years of lifting. See what I mean? Waste of time.
The available muscle fibers, the deeper fibers that are...
I know that Blaha, he's on that list. Yeah, you notice here, he's still trying to eke out a gain, lifting concentrically. One day he may get there, but possibly at the age of 100, he may be able to eke out some newbie gains, squeezing his muscles at the top, concentrically, consistently squeezing. With a consistent squeeze and an overload, he may make it there at the age of 100. I don't know, but I really doubt it.
Grow, all right? And this is pretty well understood now in the science and looking at the body. We have a pretty good idea of how this works, you know, under the microscope and in the lab.
Really? How does it work?
But essentially, you have to...
Really, how does it work?
Take sets very, very close to failure, right? You have to take sets very close to failure, you know, within a few reps to really see significant muscle growth. And the problem with that...
Okay, so you have to take it to significant failure, couple reps to see growth there or something or whatever. That doesn't make any sense. Concentrically, when you run up a stairwell concentrically, it exhausts you. It's associated with performance and endurance. When you run down a stairwell, that's associated with muscle damage and growth. Makes no sense to keep squeezing something at the top.
That means that if you're using the same form or whatever else, you're going to have to add reps or you're going to have to add weight regularly. Now, the most basic form of progressive overload is obviously simply to add weight to the bar while maintaining the same range of motion and same form. Now, the problem is, again, people will assume sometimes if they just add more weight that it's forcing more muscle growth. Well, that's not necessarily the case. If you can
this. If they just add more weight, they're forcing muscle growth. So if you add more weight and squeeze even harder, you'll force it to grow. If you keep squeezing it really hard at the top, concentrically, okay.
Whatever the exercise is. I don't care if it's a curl, a bench press, a deadlift, you know, whatever the exercise is. If you can do 100 pounds for 10 reps, okay, and you add 5 pounds to it and you're able to get 10 reps again, that's progressive overload. If you didn't change the technique to do it. In other words, are you still doing the same range of motion? Are you still doing the same amount of cheating or strictness? Okay, So notice like those curls you see me doing there, I'm coming down, down to my thigh, and I come up to my face and notice I'm having very, very little movement of my torso. So again, that's a pretty consistent way to judge it, if I'm doing the full range of motion and then I'm touching my thigh with it, and then I'm bringing it up to the face and I'm not swinging. See, that's very straightforward. But what happens if I start swinging?
Right.
What happens if I start trimming the bottom out a few more inches and I don't lock it as far? What happens if I stop bringing it higher? What happens if we start cutting range of motion? Well, if you're doing that purely to add weight, no, that's not putting more tension on the muscle. The reason the higher reps start to put tension on the muscle, beyond a 1 rep max puts tension on everything.
Why does the higher reps put the tension on the muscle squeezing it? Yes, I'd like to know, Blaha.
But if you're not doing a 1 rep max, we're obviously doing rep work here of some type.
This is obviously a concentric lift, okay?
So the idea is that we fatigue all the intermediate fibers. And those intermediate fibers grow when
So we fatigue them and they grow. We don't damage them, micro damage them to grow. We fatigue them and they're gonna magically grow. Okay.
novice, but the longer you lift, they stop growing. And you get to basically just the fastest twitch.
The longer you lift, they stop growing. What?
You would think of as the deeper muscle fibers. You've been training
The deeper muscle fibers? Okay, what about them?
in a couple years, 2-3 years.
Yeah.
That's going to be 95% of your growth is going to come from those deep fibers. And if you don't reach them, you
95% of your growth is going to come from the deep muscle fibers. How do you get to the deep muscle fibers? Let's see. If you can handle heavier loads in the eccentric, right? Like over 140%. But concentrically, the most you can handle and I mean for reps, is like 80% if you're lucky at that. And that's already heavy, 80%, okay? That's going to be really hard to curl concentrically. So which one would get the deeper, weaker muscle fibers? The concentric or the eccentric that you could lift heavier?
don't grow. Let me be clear on that. If those muscle fibers do not get recruited and fatigued sufficiently, you just simply stop growing.
They simply stop growing. Yeah. If they're not taking on more challenges, they simply stop damaging. They simply stop micro tearing. They're protected now. They won't damage unless they're under load eccentrically.
Kind of finished, your novice phase. And it's going to get worse. Like, you have to get to those deeper fibers. So the whole point here is, if you're adding weight,
Yeah. You have to get to the deeper, weaker muscle fibers, yes.
you're fatiguing those fibers more because it starts to get
So you do that weight and they fatigue the muscles, the fibers even more. You're fatiguing them, okay.
easy. Like if you're doing 10 rep sets, eventually it's going to start to get easy to do the same form with 100 pounds. You're going to have to add weight.
Okay.
In order to keep it close to failure, because otherwise, that might have been in your 10 rep max at one time, but eventually it's going to be your 12 rep, your 13, your 14 rep max. You start getting up there, you're gaining very little muscle from 10s anymore. I mean, you're gaining a little bit, but it's a lot.
You're gaining very little muscle from 10 reps anymore because you're going up to 14 or whatever? What? Okay.
Less. So usually the idea.
So you're building muscle. The weight is building a muscle. Every time you lift it, you're building a muscle. Oh, okay.
We just add weight.
I've never heard that before. Weights build muscles, but okay.
Okay, and for novices, that's what we do, because novices can progress very, very fast. Like, most novice programs are like.
Novices can progress really, really, really fast. Well, everything works in the beginning until it stops working because you don't know how to keep it working. That's your problem. You don't know what's going to keep it working. It's incumbent upon you to figure out how to keep it working. If it worked in the beginning, what you did in the beginning, well, why not repeat what you did in the beginning to keep working? See what I mean? It's just that you're a little bit blind. You can't really see. You're lifting in a full range of motion, but you don't realize it's the eccentric that causes muscle growth, not the concentric, because you can't lift heavy enough in the concentric as you could in the eccentric, and you can't put enough mechanical tension on the myofibrillar in a stretched position like you could Like you could concentrically, you can't. Like you could eccentrically. See the difference? Yeah.
They're like, come in and squat 3 by 5 or 5 by 5 and have 5 pounds every workout. They're like, what? You started with 100 pounds, you go to 105, 110.
The question is this: are there supplements that would really aid in building these myofibulars once they do get these micro damages and grow? Yeah, there is. There's some that actually aid in it. Definitely, they really work.
But you're doing it like 3 times a week. Like you're putting 15 pounds on the bar a week.
Okay.
Right, in a month, that's gone up 60 pounds. 2 months, that's gone up.
Yeah, but it's very progressively, very minute and very slow. And usually you just don't realize it. It's the eccentric part because you're going heavier concentrically. It's the eccentric that's giving it to you. But it's like you're skating uphill. It's kind of weird.
See where we're about to go with this. It's going to be over 100 pounds. So if you were doing 100 pounds, you get to that 2-month mark, you're going to be at 220, 225.
Yeah, but it's 100 pounds, but it's going down feeling like it's 50. That's the problem. So now when you go up even higher, then it feels like 60 and so forth and so on. Yeah.
Right, Max.
Oop, where was I? I think I went too far here. Here we go.
Because then we're getting that extra fatigue, right?
Yeah.
And here's the thing, the muscle fibers that grow, so if you've grown those fast twitch, those deep fibers, if those are growing, your strength is going to go up, right? Your tender.
Yeah, if you're growing those fast twitch muscle fibers, your strength will go up. Definitely. But guess what? Nobody in the gym is building anything. That's why they're complaining about genetic limit, newbie gains, and hard gainer, and all this kind of weird stuff. You understand me? Because they're not willing to lift eccentrically. You get it, man? Yeah. Failure.
Max is not going to be your
That's why they're failing.
10 rep max anymore. And your 10 rep max doesn't stay the same. Like if you get stronger.
Look, for some people, it's not their fault. They probably would want to lift eccentrically if they understood the concept of lifting and building muscle. They don't know. Because if you look around in the gym, they're all lifting conventionally. You understand? They're either lifting conventionally, right? Conventional lifting, okay? Full range of motion, like lifting. Or they're tossing up heavy weight. They're trying to move heavy weight. They think that if I lift concentrically heavier, I'll get a bigger. If I get a stronger concentrically, I'll get a bigger. And in fact, it's the opposite. If you lift way heavier eccentrically, you definitely are going to get a bigger. But you're not going to get a bigger lifting concentrically going against gravity. It's gravity that makes you bigger. Pulling down on your body.
You do 100 for 10. Think of it this way. If you got strong enough, you could do 110 for 10, then obviously 100 is no longer your 10 rep max. You're going to be able to do 12, 13, 14 reps with it. See where we're going?
Yeah, I see where you're going. Look at Blaha. These dips are concentric. So how could he possibly grow if he leaves out the equation eccentric, which is muscle building? Look, there's even 0 eccentric. He doesn't even do it for a full range to try to eke out something. Look.
So if you don't do those reps, we're not getting as much stimulus anymore.
Yeah, sure.
Because you gained muscle, so then you stop growing. You will
gained muscle, the stimulus, because you gained muscle, you're not growing anymore? What?
Outgrow a given rep and weight scheme.
No, what happened was when you came in the gym, you lifted concentrically and eccentrically, but you were unaccustomed to lifting that weight the very first time eccentrically, so it gave it to you, and then it rapidly adapted by doing what? By growing muscles, and you all call it newbie gains. It protects you now from any more damage, whatever you're doing there, you're lifting, you understand me, to make you comfortable, so you're not uncomfortable damaging and building muscles. And the truth is, your body doesn't want to build muscle, okay? But you want to build muscle, so you have to do something very specific to grow that muscle, to build that muscle. And it can only be eccentrically done.
You will outgrow it. Okay, you will outgrow it. The only
Yeah.
time that then might change is if you just keep adding more sets. But trust me, you don't want to do that. If you turn into junk volume, a lot of times guys are like, well, I'll just do more and more sets with it. Nice in theory, it starts turning into junk volume and wasting time. You could have just done the same 3 sets of 10 or whatever
Junk
and added
volume,
reps,
that's
and when
it.
you get to 12 or
Yeah.
something, you can add weight. And that's actually something I recommend to a lot of people. But the idea, you
Okay.
have to be adding weight or you have to be adding reps.
Yeah.
Now, we used to believe a form of progressive overload was higher density, meaning, well, you could take shorter and shorter breaks. And in theory, that takes you closer to failure. But here's what they found in the lab that actually
what?
causes less muscle growth. So,
What did they find in the lab that produces less muscle growth? Please tell less muscle growth. Please tell us, Blaha.
improving muscle density or work density
Yeah.
doesn't seem to actually stimulate growth. And it makes sense why. Do you know why?
Why?
Because the shorter breaks, those deep fibers haven't had time to recover. So once you've reached
The shorter breaks, the deep fibers haven't had chance to recover. Okay.
close to muscle failure, those deeper muscle fibers are
Yeah.
too tired to fire again. They will not recruit. Your nervous system won't turn them back on.
Oh, they're too tired. Okay.
Okay, so obviously the later sets get harder. So that's what happens when you get weaker set to set to set to set deeper into a workout. It's because the fast twitch fibers aren't activating. That's why you're getting tireder. It's not because you did some cardio and you're tired that way. No, literally those muscle fibers are not activating anymore. They haven't had sufficient rest time. Now, if you were to take really long breaks, you probably could do 20 sets. But you might be taking 10 minutes between sets. You're having a 4-hour workout trying to replicate that performance. So the lower density doesn't actually work. But adding weight, adding reps, if you're doing so without cheating or adjusting the range of motion, is progressive overload. You are subjecting the muscle fibers to more tension, and you are stimulating new muscle growth. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to.
You're subjecting it to more tension and subjecting it to new muscle growth. Yeah, I don't think so. But yeah, okay.
Say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys.
Very informative, very uninformative. I'll see you in the next one, friends. Don't think about that, like, subscribe, support the channel. See you later.